Hi, thanks everybody for having me down this evening. I just want to talk to you a little bit about who I am and why I'm running for Senate here in Connecticut. First of all, I was born in New Haven. I lived in the state for about 5 or 6 years. My parents divorced. I lived with my mom and my brother. She moved us around. We were down in Florida for a while, in New York City. Ultimately, she moved us out to California. I spent most of my adult life out on the West Coast. I went to college up at UC Berkeley. I was a freshman there. I was very politically active at the time. I was a big Ronald Reagan supporter. I had a life-size poster of Reagan on my college dorm, and didn't win me any points when I was still in Berkeley. But I had it up there anyway. But and I got out of college. I had a degree in business. I studied business and accounting, and I ended up working in investments. I started commodities, and then I got a job with a couple of major Wall Street firms. And I worked there for a few years and didn't really like it. I mean, I was working as a retail broker, so I wasn't on the institutional side. I was working with individuals. And I didn't think they were getting a good deal. I thought they were getting very bad advice. I thought they were getting biased advice. And I just didn't really like participating in it. So I kind of left the industry for a while. And then after a couple of years of kind of investing on my own and traveling around, I decided to get back into it. But I wanted to work on my own. I wanted to start my own business and just be able to give out the investment advice that I liked. I didn't want to have to do what my branch manager was telling me to do when I didn't think it was in the client's interest. So I kind of started on my own. And as I got started, the NASDAQ bubble really started to inflate. And so what I was doing is I was cold calling people. I was buying lists of names, and I was just cold calling, telling people about this NASDAQ bubble and trying to convince people to sell their tech stocks, to sell their internet stocks. I was saying this is going to be a crash. I had a whole pitch about why it was a bunch of nonsense. And it was very frustrating because very few people wanted to listen to me. They would laugh at me. I didn't know what I was talking about. Everybody was going to get rich. They were telling me about which .com stock they owned. But there were few people that listened to me, and I opened up a number of accounts, and I helped people sell their internet stocks, and I put them into sound investments. And then when the bubble finally burst in 2000 and these stocks collapsed and many of them went bankrupted, I had, got a pretty good reputation because I saved a lot of people a lot of money because I got them out before it crashed. And, then I was calling people up, and a lot of people, remembered me because I had called them a year or two earlier trying to warn them, and, they didn't listen to me. And some people would say, gee, I wish I had listened to you. And a lot of people, they might not even remember. I would remind them, I told you to sell those stocks. And so then I got more clients. And my business really started to pick up in 2000. When most brokers were seeing their businesses collapse, mine finally took off. Because for years, a lot of my friends who were in the business were making a lot of money. They were doing a lot of IPOs and a lot of the .com stocks. And I was making very little money because I was staying away from all that. And I was putting people into sound investments, and they were very boring. And so my stocks really weren't going up very much. But when the market collapsed, everything changed. And so my business really started to take off in 2000. As late as in January of 2000, I worked by myself. I started out of a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Los Angeles. But I had moved into an office by January in Newport Beach. But I had one secretary and me, and that was it. Now it's 10 years later. I have over 100 employees. I have 6 offices. I probably have $2 billion in customer accounts, about 15,000 customers. And the way my business started to grow is after I started adding these clients after 2000, I became very concerned about what the government was doing. Starting 2002, 2003, I thought that Alan Greenspan was irresponsible in slashing interest rates down to 1%. I thought the budget deficits that we started to run under the Bush administration were irresponsible, and I started to get worried about the U.S. economy. And as the real estate bubble inflated and got bigger and bigger, I saw a lot more damage to the economy. And so I began warning my clients that there was a major financial collapse coming, and I started getting people out of U.S. investments almost entirely. So I started investing in Asian stocks. I started investing in Europe. We bought precious metals for all our clients. We bought a lot of gold. We bought a lot of commodities. I bought oil. I bought agriculture. And as the real estate bubble got bigger and bigger, I started to write op-eds. In 2004, I wrote an op-ed in my local paper about the coming real estate collapse and the problems with adjustable rate mortgages. And as it kept getting bigger and I saw the Fed repeating these mistakes, I decided to write a book. And the first book, first I was going to write a book just called something like The American Nightmare. It was all going to be about the real estate bubble and how it was going to collapse and destroy the economy. But then I decided to write a more encompassing book that was broader in scope, just on the economy in general and investments. And I condensed real estate into one chapter. But the book I wrote was called Crash Proof: How to Profit from the Coming Economic Collapse. That book came out in February of 2007. It's since sold over 200,000 copies. But in that book, I laid out exactly what was going to happen in 2007 and 2008. And it pretty much happened the way I said it was going to happen. You know, I predicted that the real estate bubble would burst, but I also predicted that that Freddie and Fannie would go bankrupt, that a lot of the major financial institutions would fail, companies like GM would go bankrupt. I said that we would have the worst recession since the Great Depression, that we would have double-digit unemployment, and a lot of things that I pinpointed and that happened. And in conjunction with writing this book, I started going on television shows. In 2005, I started being regular on CNBC. I was on at least once a week. I was on Fox News. I was on Bloomberg. I was on CNN. And CNBC started calling me Dr. Doom because I talked about this coming economic collapse, financial collapse. And at the time, nobody else in the investment business, listened to me. They all, they thought I was crazy. They called me names, and they made fun of me. They laughed at me. And even up until even early 2008, when the recession had already started, and I was, talking about this, and people were like, you don't know what you're talking about. Everything is great. The economy is sound. It's never been better. Right up until that point. Then we had the collapse, and for a brief moment, all of a sudden, all of my predictions started to come true. And when that happened, I had gotten a lot more popular. Meantime, because of the investment advice that I was giving over those years, I had built up my firm rather substantially as far as the number of employees I have and the number of clients, and I built up that reputation. But at the same time, a lot of young people began following me. They saw me on the television, but a lot of them discovered me through YouTube because a lot of people taped my television appearances and put them up on YouTube. And a lot of young people, when they start Googling and searching the financial crisis or different things, they keep seeing me. And one of the videos that featured me was called Peter Schiff Was Right, and that one was seen by over 1.6 million people. And it was basically me on CNBC and me on Fox predicting the economic collapse, and then everybody laughing at me. And so it became very popular. Maybe I'm not even sure it was because of how right I was or how wrong everybody else was, but it was pretty entertaining. But a lot of the young kids who got to know me from these YouTube clips put up a website about a year ago to try to draft me to run for the United States Senate. Mainly because they saw that Chris Dodd was in Connecticut, and he really epitomized everything that was wrong with Washington. And he was one of the architects of the financial crisis that I predicted. And it seemed like it would be a great matchup between the two of us running for Senate. So they really tried to get me into the race. And it wasn't until a few months ago that I decided to actually do it. Now, I had never sought elected office in the past. I've never, had it as a career goal. I've spent my life trying to protect myself from the destruction coming out of Washington. I try to protect my own wealth. I try to protect my clients from the policies that I know are undermining our economy, undermining the value of our money. But as an American, I think it would be a lot more effective if I can actually go to Washington and prevent those policies from being pursued in the first place. I understand that the crisis that we have right now was caused by government. There are a lot of people who are trying to pretend that the events of 2008 were the result of the failure of the free market system, a lack of regulation, and nothing could be further from the truth. The people who are saying that are the people who didn't see it coming. They're the same people that I was arguing with for years on television. The crisis was very predictable. The people who say that nobody could have predicted it, they haven't read my book. They haven't looked at what I've said. Because I didn't just predict it. I predicted it in precise detail. And the reason I could do it wasn't because I'm so smart. I'm not any smarter than anybody. I was just thinking clearly, and I was able to use common sense, and I just wasn't going to be distracted by the hype and the mania of the day. The housing bubble never would have existed without the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve brought interest rates down to an artificially low level. They brought it down to 1%. And then you had the government